Why do you think they singled you out of the bunch?
At the time, I was really mad, and I didn't want to forgive them for what they did. Bang, and kicked the dog. And I went, what did you just do? Do not use my music.
It's 1983. A young guitarist sits alone on a Greyhound bus, traveling 4 grueling days from New York to California. His head is pounding, not just from the hangover, but from betrayal. Just hours earlier, his bandmates, people he considered brothers, ambushed him in his hotel room and delivered 3 words that would echo through metal history forever. "You're out, Dave." This isn't just any musician. This is Dave Mustaine, the fiery guitarist whose riffs helped birth thrash metal. And the band that just stabbed him in the back? Metallica, who would go on to become the biggest metal act on the planet, using the very songs he helped write. But here's where this story gets insane. That bus ride didn't break Dave Mustaine. It forged him into something more dangerous. Within months, he'd create Megadeth, Metallica's most brutal competition, turning his rage into riffs that would sell 50 million albums worldwide. This is the story of rock's most explosive firing. A tale of booze, betrayal, and a dog that started a fistfight that changed metal history forever. Welcome to the untold truth of why Metallica kicked out Dave Mustaine, and how that single decision created the most legendary feud in heavy metal. 1. The rise of Metallica and Dave Mustaine's role. Los Angeles. The Sunset Strip is crawling with glam rock posers in makeup and hairspray. But in the underground clubs, something darker is brewing. The sound is raw, aggressive, and absolutely merciless. This is thrash metal in its infancy, and it's about to explode. Enter Lars Ulrich, a tennis-playing Danish kid with bigger dreams than talent, and James Hetfield, a shy, devastating rhythm guitarist with anger issues and daddy problems. They've got the passion, but they're missing the secret ingredient that will make them legends. That ingredient has a name: Dave Mustaine. But Dave isn't just some guitarist answering classified ads in the recycler. This guy is a walking tornado of talent and attitude. Before Metallica even existed, Dave was already writing the riffs that would define thrash metal. In his previous band, Panic, he crafted early versions of what would become metal classics. When he walked into that first Metallica rehearsal in Lars's garage, he didn't just join the band, he practically took it over. Picture the scene: a cramped suburban garage, amplifiers barely held together with duct tape, and the smell of teenage rebellion mixed with marijuana smoke. James Hetfield, normally the alpha in any room, suddenly finds himself face to face with someone even more aggressive, more talented, and infinitely more confident. Dave didn't just play guitar. He commanded every space he entered like he owned it. While James cowered behind his microphone, too shy to engage the crowd, Dave was out front, whipping audiences into frenzies at legendary venues like the Troubadour and the Whiskey A Go Go. He'd leap into the crowd, scream into the void, make eye contact with every single person in the room until they believed that Metallica was the most dangerous band on Earth. His stage presence was magnetic and terrifying, a combination that would become the template for every metal frontman who followed. James needed someone to push him, Dave would later recall with characteristic bluntness, and push he did. Under Dave's influence, the shy rhythm guitarist slowly transformed into the commanding presence who would eventually fill stadiums. But here's the twisted irony. Dave was training his own replacement without knowing it, nurturing the very confidence that would eventually be used against him. The musical chemistry was undeniable. Dave's contributions weren't just substantial, they were foundational. The Four Horsemen, originally his composition Mechanics, Jump in the Fire, Phantom Lord, Metal Militia. These weren't just songs. They were manifestos of aggression that would define what heavy music could be. Dave's solos were surgical strikes of precision and fury, each note placed with mathematical precision, yet delivered with raw emotion. His riffs were hammering sledgehammers that crushed everything in their path, creating the sonic blueprint that would influence thousands of bands for decades to come. But with great talent came great instability. Dave's confidence wasn't just cockiness, it was volcanic ego barely contained in human form. He didn't just want to be in Metallica, he wanted to be Metallica. He saw himself as the creative genius behind the operation, the irreplaceable architect of their sound. And that's where the cracks started showing, hairline fractures that would eventually split the band apart. 2. The descent into chaos. By 1983, Metallica had earned a nickname that told you everything you needed to know about their lifestyle. Alcoholica. They drank hard, played harder, and lived like every day might be their last. The underground metal scene was fueled by alcohol, anger, and adolescent rebellion, and these four young men embodied all three in the most extreme ways possible. But while James, Lars, and bassist Ron McGovney treated drinking like a hobby, a way to unwind after brutal rehearsals and chaotic gigs, Dave treated it like a competitive sport, and he was winning by a landslide. His tolerance was legendary, his consumption astronomical, and his behavior while intoxicated was becoming increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. Brian Slagel of Metal Blade Records, who discovered Metallica and gave them their first record deal, watched Dave's transformation firsthand. When Dave got drunk, he became something else entirely. A raging megalomaniac who couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be controlled, couldn't be trusted. The fun-loving guitarist disappeared, replaced by an unpredictable force of destruction who saw enemies everywhere and conspiracies in every conversation. The incidents started small, but escalated rapidly. Dave would show up to rehearsals so intoxicated he could barely stand, yet somehow still play with devastating precision. He'd pick fights with audience members, challenging anyone who looked at him wrong to settle their differences outside. His pranks became increasingly dangerous. Not just harmless jokes between bandmates, but calculated acts of aggression that put everyone at risk. The infamous beer in the bass incident perfectly exemplified how far Dave's behavior had deteriorated. During a rehearsal, in what he claimed was just a prank, Dave poured beer into Ron McGovney's bass cabinet while it was still plugged in and powered on. The resulting electrical surge sent McGovney flying across the room, convulsing from the shock, while Dave laughed maniacally at his handiwork. This wasn't friendship. This was assault disguised as humor. But the band was on the verge of their biggest break yet. They'd signed with Music for Nations and were scheduled to record their debut album, Kill 'Em All, in New York with producer Paul Curcio. This should have been their moment of triumph, the culmination of 2 years of grinding through the Los Angeles underground scene. Instead, it became a powder keg, waiting for the right spark to explode everything they'd built. And that spark came in the form of man's best friend, Dave's dog, whose innocent actions would trigger the final confrontation that ended everything. 3. The breaking point and the bus ride. The dog incident sounds almost comical in retrospect, until you realize it was the moment everything fell apart forever. Picture the scene: a cramped rehearsal space in New York, 4 hungover musicians trying to prepare for the most important recording session of their lives, tensions already running higher than a Mustaine guitar solo, and Dave's dog, an innocent animal caught between massive egos and simmering resentments. When the dog jumped on Ron McGovney's car and left scratch marks on the paint, it should have been a minor annoyance, quickly forgotten amid the chaos of preparing for their album. Instead, it became the catalyst for violence that had been building for months. The car represented something more than transportation to McGovney. It was one of his few valuable possessions, a symbol of his identity beyond the band. James Hetfield, already at his breaking point with Dave's increasingly erratic behavior, made a decision that would haunt both men forever. He kicked Dave's dog. Not a gentle nudge or a playful shove, a full, deliberate kick that sent a clear message about hierarchy, respect, and who was really in charge of Metallica. Dave's reaction was instantaneous and explosive. In his mind, this wasn't just about a dog. This was about everything, about being constantly undermined despite his musical contributions, about watching James slowly gain confidence while simultaneously being marginalized, about the growing whispers that maybe Dave was too unstable, too unpredictable, too dangerous for the band's future success. The confrontation that followed was brutal and personal. Fists flew with the fury of men who had been holding back for too long. Words that could never be taken back were screamed across that small room. Accusations about talent, dedication, and loyalty that cut deeper than any physical blow. Something fundamental broke between them that afternoon, something that couldn't be repaired with apologies or time. But this explosive moment was just the most visible eruption of deeper problems that had been festering for months. The other band members had been having secret conversations about Dave's future with the group. Phone calls to Kirk Hammett from Exodus, exploring whether he might be interested in joining if a guitar position opened up. Whispered discussions about how to handle the Dave situation when he wasn't around. They'd already made their decision. The dog incident just gave them the excuse they needed to act on it. 4. The aftermath and the feud. April 11th, 1983. The date will live in metal infamy as the day Metallica committed what many consider their most calculated betrayal. They'd been planning it for weeks, maybe months. The logistics had been worked out, the replacement secured, the story rehearsed. All that remained was the execution. Dave woke up that morning in a cramped New York hotel room, probably expecting another day of preparation for the album that would launch their careers into the stratosphere. The hangover was brutal. They'd been drinking heavily the night before, as was their custom, but that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the silence from his bandmates, the lack of the usual morning banter and planning. Instead, James, Lars, and new bassist Cliff Burton surrounded his bed like executioners preparing for a ritual sacrifice. No warning, no preliminary conversation, no chance to defend himself or explain his side of the story. Just 3 words that destroyed everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed for, everything he'd built. You're out, Dave. The cruelty didn't end with the dismissal. In a move that still seems breathtakingly heartless decades later, they refused to give him a plane ticket home to California. Instead, they handed him a Greyhound bus ticket for a 4-day journey across the country. 4 days to stew in his anger, 4 days to plan his revenge. 4 days that would inadvertently create the monster Metallica never saw coming. Can you imagine the complete humiliation? You're 21 years old. You've co-written half the songs that are about to make your former bandmates millionaires, and they literally put you on the cheapest form of transportation available, like you're some kind of vagrant being run out of town. That bus ticket wasn't just transportation. It was a message, a final insult that said you're not even worth the cost of a plane ticket. The betrayal was made even worse by the timing. They'd waited until they were on the verge of recording success to eliminate him. They'd used his songs, his riffs, his creative energy to get to this point, then discarded him just before the payoff. It was calculated, cold, and absolutely devastating to someone who had given everything to the band. As that Greyhound bus pulled away from the terminal, Dave Mustaine began the journey that would transform him from a fired guitarist into one of metal's most feared competitors. 5. The reconciliation attempts. For 40 years, this feud has burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Dave has never let anyone forget what Metallica did to him, and why should he? They used his music to become the biggest metal band in history, while relegating him to a footnote in their official story. The accusations keep coming. Stolen riffs, plagiarized songs, creative theft on an epic scale. Dave claims major contributions to Leper Messiah, Ride the Lightning, and even suggests Metallica lifted the Enter Sandman riff from another band. Each claim is a dagger aimed at Metallica's legacy, a reminder that their foundation was built on someone else's work. So why did Metallica really fire Dave Mustaine? Was it the drinking, the dog, the fights, or something deeper? The truth is, it was fear. They feared his talent, his ambition, his refusal to be controlled. They chose security over genius, predictability over innovation. But here's the beautiful irony. By firing Dave Mustaine, Metallica didn't just create their biggest competition. They proved that talent can't be contained, creativity can't be killed, and betrayal sometimes births legends. Dave turned his pain into power, his anger into art, his betrayal into a legacy that sold 50 million albums. Metallica got their control, but Dave got something better. He got his revenge. The war between Metallica and Megadeth isn't just metal history. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest artists are forged in the fires of betrayal. And sometimes, getting kicked out of a band is the best thing that ever happened to you. What do you think? Was Metallica right to fire Dave? Or did they create their own worst nightmare? Let me know in the comments. This debate has been raging for 40 years, and it's not stopping now.